It's truly unfortunate that in history something tragic has to happen for people to come together and unite. It is so encouraging and motivating to see people speaking about their experiences in Pelham, because personally I had no idea the situation was this dire in this town. It's imperative that the young generations are exposed to everything that is going on currently, because Greg's generation, my generation, and the generation after me has a real chance to make a concrete difference. Thank you.
A lot of folks move to a village, either from the city or from another city, because they're going for something that's quieter, safer, nice schools, neighborhood schools.
I could walk around town with my friends. It was safe to do that. There were certain small town rites of passage, like taking the train into the city for the first time as a teenager alone. This was a really cool place to grow up.
It was always my goal to come back home and be, the homegrown cop. You have more stock in the community that you serve when you're a part of it.
The camaraderie and the friendship and the sense of community. This is a town that pulls together.
And I think just Pelham has a lot to offer. There's more work obviously that needs to be done here, but there's a reason why we're here.
It's definitely a cliquey town, I feel like, and having grown up in New Rochelle, I could tell that there was a lot of racial tension and discomfort.
White America does not accept the concept that this is a multiracial society.
When I say what was really going on here, what I mean is that there were two different experiences for people, whether you were white or whether you were a person of color.
It is never accepted the fact that there are black people, brown people, yellow people here alongside them. They've always looked upon America as being white.
And it was July 1966 when I came from New Rochelle into Pelham on this street and stopped by the police. Hey boy, what are you doing walking in Pelham? Don't ever find yourself doing this again. And I was petrified and I hurried home. In my mind though, I was like, wow, this is America. This is Pelham.
You look on a map and you see Pelham is sandwiched in between two major cities and a stone's throw away from, a major borough. And that's, we're talking within a square mile radius of where we're sitting right now. There's homicides all around us.
Tony, the mayor here, called this a very dark day for the city of Mount Vernon. The holiday shattered.
Plagued our area this weekend. In New Rochelle, 2 shootings happened in just 1 hour, one of them deadly.
It's scary. It's real though. Pelham is a unique dynamic. You feel safe and secure because of the police. The police are out there, they're doing their job. We're patrolling the streets. It's not an aggressive police department, but visually, you can't drive 5 minutes without seeing a police car in Pelham.
Unfortunately, there's a very strong feeling in Pelham where people believe that it should be a much more gated community.
When we moved here, we had been Googling Pelham, and we saw an article that a former mayor had said something about wishing he could just get rid of the bridge that connects to Mount Vernon, and we almost didn't move here because of it.
And so there's always this friction between we don't want people from other places like the Bronx, which we also border, and Mount Vernon, driving through the streets in the middle of the night. Why? They're public streets. Why do we close certain streets off? Why are certain streets barricaded? It's sending a very large signal to other people who don't live here that you're not really welcome here.
Kids from Mount Vernon, kids from New Rochelle, kids from other towns around Pelham were scared to come to Pelham. They were going to get harassed by the police because they were going to be pulled over. They were on their bikes. The cops were going to follow them. As a person who grew up in Pelham, I don't want to have this image where other towns are afraid to come here because we're racist.
I don't find that there's a communication problem. Our PDs work very collaboratively. We work collaboratively as elected officials. I don't feel that tension, but that's my viewpoint.
To say, people are trying to keep residents of Mount Vernon and New Rochelle out. I don't think it's not a message I've ever heard. I mean, you got to get out of your own bubble if that's what you're thinking.
There was a little tension about, you know, black people. Black people were normally on the north end.
It's like 3 blocks. It's always been, it's North Pelham, but it's also considered the ghetto side of Pelham because that's where all the people of color, that's where they all live. We all clustered together.
I guess I just assumed that it was based on circumstance, that that's where people just naturally ended up.
I've had friends move away from Pelham because it's too racist for them.
Is the story where this young man, I think that he's Indian American, bought a house on one of the little cul-de-sacs in Pelham, and he was doing work on his house, and it took several months, and so every day he would come at a certain time to like drop his truck off, start doing the work, and every day at a certain time the neighbors in that little area would call the police. And it got to the point where this was happening so frequently, the police officers had to literally go to the houses and knock on the door and say, like, this is your neighbor. Why don't you go introduce yourself to this person, right? Instead of calling the police on them. And this was recently.
A woman whose husband gets questioned on his own porch for just sitting on his porch because he's not supposed to be there, apparently.
When people of color are being stopped by the police, 9 times out of 10, it's for the resident that lives in front of that house is calling and saying, there's someone suspicious outside of my front door, which prompts a police response, an officer response. Neighbors are calling up and kind of doing the work of wanting to know why there's someone in front of their house that doesn't necessarily fit into the neighborhood.
Fewer people from different backgrounds are going to move here. It's just not an appealing place to live with a reputation like that, right? And then we're stuck all by ourselves. We white people with our monoculture and our lack of understanding and experience. It doesn't benefit anyone. So why are we so committed to it?
Everything I ever heard growing up was the Pelham schools are so highly ranked, they're so well funded, you know, the taxes are high here, but it's worth it. That's why families move here from Brooklyn, from Queens, from Manhattan, is for the schools, for their kids.
When I came to the district, I saw all those great things, but I did start to hear the voices of students who felt a little bit more marginalized. I think it was my first year, the Bridges of Pelham reached out to me. They were the first ones that introduced me to some of the experiences that our students and families of color had had traditionally in our schools. That opened my eyes to some things within the culture of the school that needed to be looked at.
As BIPOC parents, we're always fighting for our humanity, fighting for the humanity of our children, and that's a lot of stress. And it keeps me up at night.
In high school, I sat with all of the Blacks Latinos. We all sat together. It was maybe about 10, 20 kids. We all just sat there eating our lunch, minding our own business, so nobody would really engage with us.
My first day at school, the kids asked me if I ate fried chicken and Kool-Aid every day.
Being the only openly gay black male in my grade, it just...
I was often called like Maria, I was called Consuela, and that's not my name, and that's not who I am.
I was called to the office, and the principal at the time was asking me if I was selling drugs in her school.
And like I saw a lot of hate given towards a lot of the black girls in my school. And like just like how like they were like constantly making a point to call them ugly. They'll say their hair was nappy and disgusting. They were like always making a point to make her cry. Just out of like straight, just out of the mouth and the heart.
About 3 years ago in the middle school, there were a lot of racial incidents regarding the N-word being used against the black students there, references of going back to Africa.
I've run schools enough to know that there's a difference between hate and a kid who has not yet even really understood what words mean, or their actions mean, or what they think is a joke. And so what is a teachable moment versus what is a moment that consequences need to be put down to really make it a teachable moment, but in a different way.
Instead of being like mean to them, educate them. Why do we have to be entitled to educate somebody? Am I a teacher? Like, just having to educate somebody at like a young age because they're ignorant doesn't sit right with me. Like, you should know that these things like are not okay.
When you say something that they don't want to hear, they'll try to stifle the conversation immediately. There was even one kid in my grade who like literally said to me, this doesn't really affect me and I don't really care about this conversation, so let's stop talking about this.
And I can tell you to this day, it still bothers my children. So these are not situations where it's a one and done situation. These are like scars that these kids have to carry.
It stuck. It stuck. It made me realize that I wasn't like everyone else. I had to do things differently in order to survive, you know?
There was no one that stuck up for them because there is this culture in Pelham. It's like, why would you ever stand up for something like that? It's just expected that you let these people keep on going unchecked.
So the school can only do so much under, the guidance of New York State. But it's important for families to have these discussions. When those incidents happened in the middle school relating to the N-word, there was one kid that actually approached another kid and says, hey, what you're doing is wrong and it's not right, it's racist, right? So to me, I'm like, wow, like who is your parent? Let me speak to this parent, because they felt the need to stand up. And so I called the parent and talked to that parent and basically said, thank you. Thank you for raising a child who's willing to stand up for others.
It certainly caught us all by surprise, and then we're in the midst of dealing with this trauma of the pandemic, so it was trauma on top of trauma. It was challenging to really know the right thing to do in that moment.
We had a lot of conversations around how we wanted to show up to this. And I think all of us knew that we were going to be saying yes to a path before we really knew what that path was going to be.
I think that incident struck me in so many ways. It was difficult for me to articulate a response at first. This board did address the incident. We made a statement on our Facebook page, on our website, and we spoke about it.
If this is the town that everybody talks up as being so neighborly and so close-knit and all that stuff, then like where are you when it matters?
Get off the street. Okay, get your window.
The black folks I was talking to at that time, they were asking questions that were about accountability.
Okay, let me count to three. And I'm going in.
I definitely have never worried about my own safety with regard to a police officer. If I'm pulled over, I'm not worried I'm going to die in that moment.
From Brazil to Iran, thousands have gathered to show solidarity with U.S. protests over the killing of George Floyd.
What I realized was that I lived a tremendously privileged life where I wasn't exposed to a lot of this. Greg reached out to us with this idea. I thought that it was a perfect way to sort of force not just myself, but also the community as a whole to reflect and realize where we stand in the world of, I guess, American racism and how like we can take a step to make it better just in our hometown.
George Floyd happened and I was like, okay, it's time. Enough is enough. I have to be more proactive about this and more involved. And I think a lot of people had that awakening last year.
So yeah, this is Wolf's Lane Park. This is where we did the vigils over the summer. We would just gather around this water fountain. Actually, it wasn't running over the summer, so this was filled with like candles and flowers and other tokens and memorials to George Floyd. And we would just gather in a circle, creating that community. We'd share our stories, come together, and then we would take a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to honor George Floyd and the brutal attack that took his life. So 8 minutes and 46 seconds every night, and it's a long time. You're down there on your knees and you feel it. You have a lot to think about.
I think change is coming.
Yeah, no blueprint, no playbook. We were winging it. It was tough. There were a lot of obstacles getting this done. Some folks that thought this would be negative, they thought that there was the potential of like violence happening or vandalism, but that wasn't the case. We were just alumni that wanted to provide a platform. That was it. No riot. Like, we didn't want to like steal anything from Pelham. We just wanted voices to be heard.
To the Black members in our community, we see you and love you. We honor you and are here today to support you. My name is N.Y.C. Tori Bowser and I will merely serve as a vessel for the Black voices of Pelham that have felt unheard for quite some time.
I was so proud of Pelham. Like, I can't even express the level of happiness to see so many people who were not BIPOC out there in support. Like, that's what I consider an ally. It was just such a proud moment seeing people march over from Pelham side, people from Pelham, and then like we're coming together at this one central focus. Like, to me, that's changed. It just seems, when people talk about civil rights era, like that seemed like a civil rights era, such a pivotal, critical moment in this town's history. And then, the block over, you had Michael Schroner, the same individual, unfortunately lost his life fighting for the same thing. I mean, I couldn't have been prouder as a Pelham resident, as a BIPOC parent, or as a human with what we did that summer.
Once again, I feel very, very, very positive that it is moving to a higher level of consciousness. Because of that, it's going to be different relationship issues that will surface.
It gives me so much hope, but the reason it gives me hope is because these are children sometimes who grew up in families where their family members or their parents or their caregivers don't actually have the same views. That's transformational.
That they had a lot of family members, whether it was their parents or grandparents or whoever it was, come up to them and sort of question why they were doing it, why they were wasting their time in their eyes.
Yeah.
I give them all the respect in the world to be able to do that, because it's the dinner table. It gets uncomfortable, and to stay with it and to make your point to your parents and to other influential people in your community and around you, that always takes guts.
I don't think it was fair how police were, the broad brushstroke was painted over everybody, but it happens in every profession. And I understand the emotional response that happened after that. And I think the pendulum swung a little too far with the defunding the police and a lot of the rhetoric that happened around the profession.
The biggest misunderstanding is that people think that defunding the police means abolishing the police, and that's not true. There's about $6 billion that are sent to police departments to militarize the police departments. They have bayonets, they have armored vehicles, aircraft, that kind of thing. There are schools in many, many districts that have cops but don't have school nurses.
It isn't something that can even be entertained because the police fund basically pays just the salaries. We're not a police department that has a helicopter or any, really special detailed services. We have the patrol officers and that's it. There's not much more to defund here unless you're taking away, jobs from the police officers, but then that leaves the community at risk.
There is nothing really to fear in this town. And that goes back to the point, do we need so much police? Do we need, $4.5 million being spent on both sides of the town here on police?
Police are being villainized and under constant attack.
I know they don't care about us.
With protests and clashes echoing across the nation, it's also supporters of police now demanding to be heard.
We're entrusted to protect society, and yeah, there are bad apples in every profession. It doesn't speak volumes for the good-hearted men and women that are out there putting their lives on the line and making the ultimate sacrifice for complete strangers.
To go out every single day knowing I could not come home. I mean, that's terrifying. And also, we have to acknowledge that policing in America has systemic racism running through it.
Because they will always benefit and profit off of this type of racism. It'll always keep them secure and safe. And when something threatens that, I mean, they will never be outraged of members of the police that they are just so, like, trying to protect so much, targeting members of their community and murdering innocent people. They'll never be outraged about that. They'll be outraged about if something that keeps them protected is threatened every single time.
We need to understand that there are historic reasons why black people find themselves in the positions they are, and systemic racism isn't a myth, it's a fact.
We were told that the flag was a sign of white supremacy. However, the communication that went out from the district said that children expressed concern. And if that is the case, this would have been a teachable moment. Instead of dividing our town, we were in a very, very small town that now is incredibly divided over this.
I'm saddened anytime a small town is suddenly thrust into a national scene. Suddenly we're the lightning rod, and to me what it feels like, it puts people like you got to back up into a corner.
The media storm added so much meaning and misinformation to what happened in that moment, and divided. I took away that opportunity for us to try to unite. I don't think it's too late.